A good friend of mine gave me this iPhone 15 completely for free. However, as you can see, it's destroyed. The back is smashed, the screen is obliterated with multiple lines going through it, and given the extensive amount of damage, I'm shocked that it's still working at all. Will I be able to save this phone from becoming e-waste and turn a profit, or was this phone always destined for the landfill? Let's find out. And so, here it is. A completely destroyed iPhone 15 left in a totally unusable state. There isn't an inch of this device without a mark, scratch, or scuff, and as you can see, the display is absolutely shot. Many repair stores typically avoid big projects like this because not only is it extremely time consuming, but Apple's anti-repair practices make it very difficult to do the job to a satisfactory standard. Nevertheless, I do enjoy a challenge, so let's see if we can get this iPhone 15 looking brand new once again. We'll start by removing the two pentalobe screws at the bottom of the device before heating the back of the phone to soften the adhesive holding the back glass in place. Because of just how badly the back glass on this device was damaged, I was unable to get a grip of it with my suction cup, so unfortunately we'll have to use some isopropyl alcohol and brute force to get into the phone. Before the iPhone 14, removing the back glass would have required an expensive laser machine to get the job done. Thankfully, that's not the case for the newer iPhone models. Once we've removed the metal bracket, it's important to disconnect the battery first to prevent any damage or short circuits to the logic board. With the battery safely disconnected, we will remove the metal bracket holding the back glass in place before detaching it from the phone. With the back glass removed, this repair doesn't get any easier. A large part of that can be attributed to Apple's anti-repair practices. There's at least 6, maybe even 7 different types of screws inside of the iPhone 15, meaning you're constantly changing screwdrivers. Whilst other phone manufacturers are far from perfect, I can't name a single one that uses more screws than Apple. According to schematics online, there's around 70 screws inside of the iPhone 15, which is just completely overkill. After what feels like an eternity, we can finally start removing major components like the rear camera. We can then remove the front camera before attacking the army of screws holding the logic board in place. With the earpiece speaker out of the way, it seems like it's time to remove the logic board, except you can't because there's a tiny flex cable which runs underneath the screen, which is virtually impossible to see. If you miss it, there's no easy way of fixing it. It's almost as if it was designed this way to catch you out and force you to make your way back to an Apple store if you mess up. Which means to disconnect just that one tiny flex cable, we have to remove the entire screen, which of course is easier said than done given its condition. The screen is so badly damaged that it's literally detached itself from its own frame and is peeling apart layer by layer as I remove it. Eventually, we're in, and with that we can remove the screen from the frame. This finally frees up the logic board, allowing us to remove it from the housing. We can then remove the battery with the help of some isopropyl alcohol and some heat to make my life a little bit easier. The last to go is the charging port, which houses the Taptic engine, aka the vibration motor, the SIM card tray, and the bottom speaker. It's also held in with over 20 different screws. Of course, there's also multiple different types of screws, again completely unnecessary from Apple and a clear deterrent to self-repair. And a trillion screws later, the charging port finally comes out. Which means we can finally bring over our brand new housing. I'm trying to keep this device as close to factory finish as possible, so I'm using original parts wherever I can. This is an original Apple housing pulled from another device which comes with all the extra accessories. To keep things straightforward, I elected to get the housing with the volume and power buttons pre-installed along with some other small parts. Speaking from experience, this is going to save me a lot of time. But of course, in true Apple fashion, there are still some microscopic meshes and parts that need to be transferred over from the old housing, which is an extremely tedious process. With all of the components out of the device, it's always a great idea to get things cleaned up. Good thing I did, because the charging port was absolutely filthy. With the charging port cleaned up, we can start to meticulously reassemble the device, piece by piece and screw by screw. It's extremely important to place every single screw in its correct designated spot. Mess it up and you could very well damage the housing or even the logic board, destroying the phone in its entirety. Can you just imagine how much simpler things would be if Apple stuck to only one kind of screw? No? Well, neither can I, because they never will. I mean, heck, if it wasn't for the EU literally strong-arming Apple and legally forcing them to have USB-C on the iPhone, I'm pretty sure we'd still have a lightning port there to this day. With a lot of effort, our phone is finally starting to take shape, which means it's time to bring over our brand new display. This is an original Apple display which I bought cracked and then had professionally refurbished. Although I wish I could have restored the original screen, unfortunately this isn't possible due to the extensive damage to the OLED panel. Nevertheless, we'll clean up the old adhesive from our refurbished display as best we can using isopropyl alcohol. We can then transfer all the components from our old screen onto the new display. We have to be extremely careful when doing this because damaging this cable means losing auto brightness and a ton of other important features. With surgical levels of precision, the cable's out and onto the new display. I can then go ahead and loosely reinstall the display, rear camera and other components just to make sure everything's working as it should. With that, once we've reinserted our battery, the device is put together enough to test. Now for the moment of truth. Pressing the power button shows us the Apple logo, which is a great sign. However, we're not out of the woods just yet. The phone does eventually spring to life, and the first thing I do is check the battery health, which is at 86%. It's decent and perfectly fine for a used phone. However, I'm a perfectionist and want this phone to feel brand new, so I'm likely going to end up replacing it anyway. I then checked over all the other major components like the speakers, cameras, microphones, Face ID, etc., and all were working flawlessly. With everything seemingly working as it should, we can go ahead and power off the device before detaching the display one more time. We can then go ahead and clean up and transfer any other small hidden meshes and components from the old frame onto the new one. At long last, we can reinstall the waterproof adhesive before attaching and resealing the display for good. Unfortunately, I'm still not done. I have to go ahead and transplant the wireless charging coil and flash module onto a replacement back glass. Again, as you can imagine, this is a very delicate process. One wrong move and you've lost your wireless charging, your flash and your mic all in one go. Thankfully, with the help of some heat and isopropyl alcohol, the module comes out in one piece. With the module removed, it's time to bring over our replacement back glass. The replacement back glass came with the MagSafe magnets pre-installed, once again making everything much simpler and saving me a ton of time. All that's left to do now is to reinstall the wireless charging coil alongside a couple of brackets. What could possibly go wrong? Everything was going perfectly until I realised the rear microphone mesh didn't come pre-installed on the replacement back glass. Slightly inconvenient, but no problem I thought. I'll just go ahead and transfer it from the old back glass. Oh, how wrong I was. For whatever reason, this bracket wouldn't budge. I've never experienced this problem before. I genuinely spent over an hour trying to remove this one bracket. It was literally like the Hulk himself was holding it in place. Eventually, I got angry and decided to just remove it with some pliers. To nobody's surprise, that didn't exactly go well. I mean, I did technically get it free, but by the time I was done with it, it was so mangled and messed up that there was no way I could reuse it. So I ended up having to buy a replacement part, which thankfully wasn't too expensive. With the replacement mesh successfully reinstalled, I decided it was time to replace the battery. And at long last, we can go ahead and install a brand new waterproof adhesive for the back glass. Having transferred all the components from the old back glass to the new one, it's time to go ahead and install it into the device. We can then ensure that all the final screws and brackets are placed back in their correct locations. Now, after all that hard work, it's time to reseal the phone, power it on, and get the parts paired for Apple's diagnostics. Considering we used primarily authentic parts, this shouldn't really be an issue. The battery configuration goes smoothly, with it showing as genuine and pairing perfectly. However, configuring our original refurbished screen shows us that the display is locked to the previous owner. You heard that correctly, Apple are iCloud locking phone parts. Unfortunately, there's no way to know when buying a used phone part if it's iCloud locked or not, so even though I know the screen is original and Apple knows the screen is original, no matter what I do, I'm still going to get that dreaded unknown parts message. Yet another sneaky tactic to deter you from fixing your own device or getting it repaired by a third party. Without the Apple ID of the previous owner, this screen is essentially e-waste. And although the screen functions perfectly fine, Apple knows that the unknown parts message tanks the value of the phone on the secondhand market when it comes time to sell the device. After putting in so many hours into restoring this phone to such a high standard, you can imagine I was extremely disappointed to see this message. Nevertheless, we can complete the parts pairing process, restart the device, and reinstall the two pentalobe screws. And after removing the plastic seal from the back glass, this nightmare repair is finally complete. So here it is, an iPhone 15 once completely destroyed, restored to immaculate condition and given a new lease on life. However, the big computer at Apple continues to give the middle finger to third-party repairers. The only thing separating this iPhone 15 from a brand new one is that ridiculous and quite frankly inaccurate unknown parts message. However, because Apple secretly knows we did use an original display, even if they're pretending we didn't, we have retained key features like True Tone and Auto Brightness, which we wouldn't have done had we have used a third-party display. And to make sure this phone functions exactly as new, we replaced the battery, meaning we now have the perfect score of 100% battery health. In terms of profit, it gets a bit complicated. I may have become a little bit too emotionally attached to this project and bought another original iPhone 15 screen for £130, which should get rid of this stupid important display message. Now, I know I didn't necessarily need to do this, however, I didn't want to sell something to a customer which I myself wouldn't personally be happy with. The total cost of all the parts, including the brand new display, comes to just under £330. I have rounded all of these figures just to make them a little bit easier to work with. I'm hoping to sell the display that's currently on this device for around £60 to £70, although that may be a little bit optimistic. On our website, the iPhone 15 starts at just £389. This device is in pristine condition and could very well sell for more. However, considering the extensive amount of repair work done to it, and the fact it currently has a non-genuine parts message, we'll take a worst case scenario figure of £389, which would leave us with an estimated profit of around £120. Although that figure is contingent on us selling this display. Once I've completed the screen replacement yet again, I'll leave an update in the comments in terms of costs, profits, etc. As you can imagine, this video obviously took a lot of time and money to make, so if you did enjoy, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you guys in the next one.